I lifted you for years. Now let me help you fall.
The forklift's yellow blade scraped concrete inches from Declan Kruger's head as he rolled behind a stack of wooden pallets. His shirt was torn, a thin cut on his scalp trailing down his temple, but his breathing stayed steady, controlled. The warehouse echoed with the mechanical whine of the machine reversing for another charge. He wasn't supposed to be here tonight, but then again, neither was the man hunting him with 2 tons of industrial equipment. 30 hours earlier, everything had been different. 30 hours earlier. Declan adjusted his tool belt and studied the broken freight elevator at Meridian Logistics. The cables hung slack, the motor housing cracked open like a split walnut. Another routine repair job in another sterile corporate building. "How long you think?" asked the security guard, a heavy-set man named Bo, who always had coffee breath and sports opinions. "Couple hours," Declan said, running his fingers along the damaged pulley system. "Someone overloaded this thing. Weight limits posted right there for a reason." Bo chuckled. "These corporate types don't read signs. Too busy making deals." Declan nodded absently, focused on the mechanical problem in front of him. He'd been fixing elevators for 18 years, ever since he'd dropped out of engineering school to help his father's repair business. The work was honest, predictable. Nobody noticed the guy with the toolbox until something broke. His phone buzzed. A text from Kendra, his wife of 12 years. "Book club running late tonight. Don't wait up." He stared at the message for a moment. 3rd book club this month. Kendra had never been much of a reader. "You okay, Deck?" Bo was watching him with mild concern. "Yeah, fine." Declan pocketed his phone and got back to work. 3 hours later, he'd replaced the motor assembly and tested the system twice. The elevator hummed smoothly between floors, carrying its maximum load without strain. As he packed his tools, Bo appeared with a clipboard. "Need you to sign in for the work order," Bo said. "Company policy." Declan scribbled his signature on the visitor log, then glanced at the previous entries. Most were deliveries and maintenance calls during business hours, but one name caught his eye, time-stamped at 11:47 p.m. the previous Tuesday. K. Lowell Kruger, Compliance Review. Kendra had been here last Tuesday night, the same Tuesday she'd told him she was at book club. "Everything all right?" Bo asked. "Just thinking," Declan said. He closed the logbook and shouldered his tool bag. "Thanks for the coffee." The drive home to their subdivision in Bay City took 40 minutes. Declan used the time to think, his hands steady on the wheel despite the questions multiplying in his head. Kendra worked in compliance, sure, but she'd never mentioned working late, never mentioned being at this particular facility. Their house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a modest 2-story with vinyl siding and a small lawn Declan kept precisely edged. Kendra's Toyota was in the driveway, and lights were on in the kitchen. He found her at the counter, still in her work clothes, scrolling through her phone while reheating leftover pasta. "How was book club?" he asked. She looked up with a smile that seemed just slightly too bright. "Oh, you know how it is." Sarah went on and on about symbolism in Chapter 12. "I thought we'd never get through it." "What book are you reading?" "The one I told you about, the literary one." She waved her hand vaguely. Something about family secrets, very dramatic. Declan nodded and opened the refrigerator, pulling out a beer. "Sarah mention anything interesting?" "Not really. Same old complaints about her husband working too much." Kendra's tone was casual, but she'd turned back to her phone, avoiding eye contact. They ate dinner with the television on, some cooking show neither of them particularly cared about. Kendra seemed distracted, checking her phone every few minutes. "Expecting something important?" Declan asked. "Just work emails. You know how it is." He didn't know, actually. Kendra had always been strict about keeping work and home separate. "No emails after 6, she used to say. Family time was sacred. After dinner, she went upstairs to shower. Declan cleaned the dishes and listened to the water running overhead. When she came down in her bathrobe, hair still damp, she seemed more relaxed. "I'm tired," she said, kissing his cheek. "Long day." "I'll be up in a bit," Declan said. "Just want to finish this beer." She nodded and headed upstairs. A few minutes later, he heard the bedroom door close. Declan sat in his recliner and stared at the dark television screen. Kendra's purse was on the kitchen counter where she'd left it. Her phone was charging on the end table beside the couch. He'd never been the suspicious type. Never checked up on her, never doubted her word. But something felt off, like a machine running just slightly out of tune. You couldn't always hear it, but you could feel it in the vibration. The next morning, Kendra left for work at her usual time, 7:30 a.m. sharp. Declan had already been up for an hour, drinking coffee and thinking. He had 2 service calls scheduled, both routine maintenance. The kind of work that left his mind free to wander. His first stop was a hospital elevator that needed new buttons. Simple job, but it put him in contact with the building's security chief, a retired cop named Jim Hansel, who'd always been friendly. "Declan, right?" Hansel said, watching him work. "You've been here before. Few times over the years." Declan tested the new button panel. "Hospital elevators get a lot of wear." "Tell me about it." "We log every malfunction, every repair. Insurance company makes us keep detailed records." Hansel sipped his coffee from a paper cup. "You ever think about getting into private investigation? Guy with your attention to detail could do well?" "Never really considered it." "Not much to it, really. Mostly observation and documentation. People think it's all car chases and confrontations, but 90% is just watching and waiting." Declan filed the information away and finished his work. The second call was an apartment complex with a temperamental elevator that kept stopping between floors. Another mechanical problem with a mechanical solution. But on the drive home, his mind kept returning to that visitor log. K. Lowell Kruger, 11:47 p.m. Working late on compliance review. Except Kendra had never mentioned any late-night reviews, never complained about overtime or deadline pressure. He stopped at an electronics store and bought a small GPS tracker, the kind marketed to parents worried about teenage drivers. The device was about the size of a matchbox, magnetic, with a battery life of 2 weeks. That evening, Kendra announced she had another book club meeting. 2 in 1 week? Declan asked. "We're behind schedule. Sarah wants to finish the book before next month." She was applying lipstick in the hallway mirror, checking her appearance. "Might be later than usual." "No problem. I've got some paperwork to catch up on." She kissed him goodbye and headed for the garage. Declan waited until he heard her car pull out of the driveway, then went to his workshop in the basement. The GPS tracker came with a smartphone app that showed real-time location data. Simple technology, but effective. He tested it on his own truck, watching the little blue dot move as he drove around the block. An hour later, he activated the tracker and slipped it under the rear bumper of Kendra's Toyota. The magnetic mount held it securely against the metal frame. Then he settled in to wait. Kendra's route started normally enough. Down their street, onto the main road toward downtown Bay City. But instead of heading to Sarah's neighborhood, the blue dot turned north, toward the industrial district near Saginaw. Declan grabbed his jacket and keys. He stayed well back, following the GPS signal rather than trying to keep her car in sight. The tracker led him through increasingly sparse neighborhoods, past strip malls and vacant lots, until Kendra's car stopped at a small house near the lake. The address was 1247 Harbor View Drive, a modest ranch house with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. Not the kind of place for a book club meeting. Declan parked 3 blocks away and walked back, staying in the shadows. Kendra's Toyota was in the driveway next to a newer Honda Civic. Lights were on in the front room, curtains drawn. He circled the property carefully, noting the layout, the sight lines from neighboring houses. The backyard was dark, bordered by a chain-link fence and thick trees. Through a gap in the curtains, he could see movement inside. 2 figures, Kendra and a man he didn't recognize. They weren't reading books. Declan watched for 20 minutes, long enough to confirm what he already knew. Then he walked back to his truck and drove home, his mind perfectly calm. The next morning, Kendra was cheerful at breakfast, asking about his day, sharing gossip from work, normal conversation between married people. Except now, Declan heard the false notes, the practiced casualness. "How was book club?" he asked. "Oh, Sarah's getting really invested in the main character's story arc." Kendra buttered her toast with careful precision. "I think we'll finish the book next week." "That's nice." She glanced at him sharply. "You seem distracted lately. Everything okay?" "Just work stuff, nothing major." After she left, Declan called his sister Ainsley. She lived in Detroit, worked as a loan collector for a bank, and had no patience for small talk or emotional drama. "I need some advice," he said. "Legal or financial?" "Both, probably." "Come up this weekend, we'll talk." Ainsley's apartment was sparse and functional, like everything else about her. She was 5 years older than Declan, taller, with graying hair she kept pulled back in a practical ponytail. She poured coffee and sat across from him at her kitchen table. "Tell me," she said. Declan laid out the facts methodically. The late-night work entry, the book club lie, the house near the lake. Ainsley listened without interruption, making occasional notes on a legal pad. You get pictures? She asked when he finished. No, wasn't thinking that far ahead. Start thinking that far ahead. You want to divorce her, you'll need documentation. Michigan's a no-fault state, but adultery still matters for asset division. I don't know if I want to divorce her. Ainsley raised an eyebrow. What do you want? It was a good question. Declan had been asking himself the same thing during the long drive to Detroit. I want her to understand what she's done. Understanding and consequences are two different things. Maybe they don't have to be. Ainsley studied him for a moment. You're not talking about counseling and reconciliation. No, good, because cheaters don't change, they just get better at hiding it. She tapped her pen against the legal pad. You want to know about your financial situation? Tell me. Joint savings account shows regular deposits from both of you, but she's been moving money. Small amounts, spread over 6 months, maybe $15,000 total. Declan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Moved where? Business account. Something called K. Lowell Consulting Services, registered 3 months ago. They spent the next hour going through bank statements and financial records. Kendra had been methodical, careful not to take large amounts at once, but the pattern was clear. She was building a separate financial life. She's planning to leave you, Ainsley said, probably waiting until she has enough saved up, or until the affair partner is ready to make it official. How long do you think I have? Hard to say. Could be weeks, could be months. Depends on how comfortable she gets. Declan drove home with a clearer picture of his situation. Kendra wasn't just having an affair. She was executing a plan. The careful financial maneuvering, the elaborate lies about book club, the secretive behavior. All of it pointed to someone preparing for a major life change. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated him. Monday morning, Declan created a fake LinkedIn profile under the name David Mitchell, claiming to be a recruitment specialist for warehouse and logistics positions. The profile was professional enough to pass casual inspection, complete with a generic profile photo and detailed work history. His target was Meridian Logistics, where Kendra worked. Specifically, the management team that would include whoever was meeting her at that house near the lake. The company's website listed their leadership team with photos and brief biographies. Declan studied each face carefully, looking for a match to the figure he'd glimpsed through the curtains. Bryce Halperin, Warehouse Innovation Director, age 36, according to his bio. MBA from Michigan State, 5 years with the company. The photo showed a lean man with dark hair and an expensive smile. Declan cross-referenced the image with social media profiles. Bryce was active on Instagram, posting gym selfies and pictures of craft beer. His car was a Honda Civic, silver, newer model, the same car that had been parked next to Kendra's Toyota. Now he had a name. Bryce's Instagram posts revealed useful information. He worked out at Iron Core Gym 3 times a week, usually around 6 p.m. He lived in a downtown loft apartment. He had expensive tastes and liked to show off. More importantly, he was careless with personal information. His posts were geotagged, his schedule predictable, the kind of man who thought his charm and position made him untouchable. Declan spent Tuesday evening parked outside Iron Core Gym, watching Bryce work out through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The man was vain about his appearance, spending as much time checking himself in the mirrors as actually exercising. After his workout, Bryce grabbed a protein shake from the gym's juice bar and headed to his Honda. Declan followed at a distance, noting his route, his driving habits, his destinations. Bryce made 2 stops, a liquor store where he bought expensive bourbon, and a florist where he purchased a dozen red roses. Then he drove to 1247 Harbor View Drive. Kendra was already there. Declan parked in his usual spot 3 blocks away and walked back to observe. This time he brought a small digital camera with a telephoto lens, borrowed from his nephew's photography collection. Through the gap in the curtains, he could see them clearly. Kendra wore a red dress he'd never seen before. They were drinking wine, talking animatedly. Bryce handed her the roses with a theatrical flourish that made her laugh. Declan took pictures, not for evidence in a divorce court, but for his own clarity. He needed to see the reality of their betrayal, to understand exactly what he was dealing with. They kissed like teenagers, passionate and urgent. Kendra's hands tangled in Bryce's hair as he pulled her close. This wasn't a casual affair or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a relationship, complete with gifts and romance and careful planning. Declan lowered the camera and walked back to his truck. He'd seen enough. The next morning, Kendra hummed while making breakfast. She seemed lighter, more energetic than she'd been in months. The guilt and tension he'd noticed recently had been replaced by something that looked almost like happiness. "You seem cheerful," Declan said. "Just feeling good today. Sometimes everything clicks, you know?" "I know." She kissed him goodbye with lips that had been on another man 12 hours earlier. Declan watched her leave, then called in sick to work. He had research to do. Jim Hansel, the retired cop from the hospital, agreed to meet for coffee that afternoon. They sat in a diner booth while Hansel explained the basics of surveillance and documentation. "Most people are creatures of habit," Hansel said. "They think they're being unpredictable, but they follow patterns without realizing it. Same routes, same times, same places. What about evidence? Photographs, receipts, phone records, if you can get them legally. But the most important thing is patience. Don't rush it. Let them get comfortable. Let them make mistakes." "How long does that usually take?" "Depends on how careful they are. Most affair partners get sloppy after a few months. They start taking risks, getting careless." Declan thought about Bryce's Instagram posts, the geotagged locations, the predictable schedule. "What if they're already being careless?" Hansel smiled. "Then your job gets a lot easier." That evening, Declan told Kendra he'd be working overnight on an emergency repair job at a water tower in Pontiac. The job was fictional, but the story was plausible enough to avoid questions. Instead, he parked near Harborview Drive and settled in to watch. Kendra arrived at 8:30 p.m., followed 20 minutes later by Bryce. They followed the same routine: wine, conversation, physical intimacy. But this time, Declan was prepared for a longer observation. They ordered takeout Chinese food, ate dinner by candlelight, talked for hours. Through the telephoto lens, Declan could see them planning something, looking at papers spread on the coffee table. Bryce pointed to documents while Kendra nodded and took notes. At 2 a.m., Bryce left first. Kendra waited 15 minutes, then followed. Separate departures, careful timing. They were experienced at this deception. Declan drove home and was in bed by 3 a.m. When Kendra slipped in beside him an hour later, he pretended to be asleep. "How was the water tower?" she asked in the morning. "Tricky job. Took longer than expected." "Well, I'm glad you got it fixed." The casual lie came so easily to her. Declan wondered how long she'd been practicing this particular skill. Over the next week, he established their pattern. Tuesday and Thursday nights at the lake house. Lunch dates at a restaurant across town on Wednesdays. Weekend morning coffee while Declan was supposedly running errands. They were building a life together, complete with inside jokes and shared routines. Planning for a future that didn't include Declan. But they'd made another mistake. They'd gotten comfortable. Ainsley called on Friday with more financial intelligence. "She's moved another $5,000, she reported. Plus, she's been researching divorce attorneys. I found her search history through a mutual contact at her company." "How did you manage that?" "Better you don't know. Point is, she's getting ready to file. Probably within the next month." "Good to know. What's your next move?" Declan had been thinking about that question all week. The traditional approach would be to confront them, demand explanations, file for divorce. Messy, emotional, expensive. Everyone would choose sides, offer sympathy, rehash the details endlessly. But there was another way. "I'm going to make them uncomfortable," he said. "How uncomfortable?" "Uncomfortable enough to make mistakes." Declan's first move was subtle. He created a Craigslist ad in the personal section, carefully worded to seem like a woman seeking discretion, seeking confident professional man for ongoing arrangement. Must be discreet, physically fit, enjoy adventure, warehouse or logistics background preferred, serious inquiries only. He posted the ad with a burner email address, then sent Bryce a message from his fake LinkedIn account. "Saw your profile and thought you might be interested in this opportunity. Found your information through mutual professional contacts. Might be worth checking out." Craigslist link. The response came within 2 hours. "You know who this is? Lose this number." Bryce had recognized the setup, or at least suspected it, but his reply confirmed his guilt and paranoia. An innocent man would have been confused, maybe annoyed. A guilty man would be defensive. More importantly, Bryce now knew someone was watching. Declan's second move was more direct. He rented a beat-up pickup truck from a friend who ran a small moving company, then used it to follow Bryce after his gym workout on Tuesday. Instead of going to the lake house, Bryce drove to a closed shipping yard on the outskirts of town, probably expecting to meet whoever had sent the Craigslist message. Declan was waiting. He approached Bryce's car from behind, tapping on the passenger window. Bryce rolled it down cautiously. "You looking for someone?" Declan asked. Up close, Bryce was smaller than he'd appeared in photos. Fit, but not imposing. His expensive clothes and confident smile couldn't hide the nervousness in his eyes. "I think there's been some mistake," Bryce said. "No mistake. You're sleeping with my wife." For a moment, they stared at each other through the open window. Then Bryce tried to start his car. Declan reached through the window and grabbed the keys. "We're going to talk. I don't know what you think you know, but Kendra Lowell Kruger, Harbor View Drive, Tuesday and Thursday nights." Declan's voice was perfectly calm. "Want me to keep going?" Bryce's face went pale. "Look, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The question is what we're going to do about it." "Are you threatening me?" Declan pulled out his phone and showed Bryce one of the photographs he'd taken. Bryce and Kendra kissing in the lake house window. "I'm informing you," Declan said. "Your relationship with my wife is over. Today. If I see you near her again, these pictures go to your boss, your neighbors, and everyone you know. You can't prove anything. I can prove enough." Declan dropped the car keys in Bryce's lap. "Stay away from her." He walked back to the rental truck, leaving Bryce sitting alone in the empty shipping yard. But Declan's real target wasn't Bryce. That night, Kendra came home from her supposed book club meeting, nervous and distracted. She kept checking her phone, pacing around the kitchen, jumping at small sounds. "Everything okay?" Declan asked. "Fine, just tired." "Book club getting intense?" She forced a smile. "You know how Sarah gets about plot twists." Declan nodded sympathetically and went back to watching television. But he could feel Kendra's anxiety filling the room like smoke. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She read it quickly, her face growing pale. "I need to run to the store," she said. "We're out of milk. I can go." "No, I need the air. Back in 20 minutes." She left quickly, forgetting her purse on the kitchen counter. Declan followed at a distance, using the GPS tracker to monitor her route. She drove straight to Harbor View Drive, where Bryce's Honda was already waiting. This time, Declan didn't bother with surveillance. He drove directly to the house and parked in the driveway behind both cars, blocking them in. Then he walked to the front door and knocked. Bryce answered, shirtless and obviously flustered. "What the heck are you doing here? I told you to stay away from her. You can't just—" Declan pushed past him into the living room. Kendra was sitting on the couch, hastily buttoning her blouse. Her face was flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Declan, what are you doing? Ending this conversation?" He looked around the room, noting the wine glasses, the scattered clothes, the rumpled couch cushions, evidence of their ongoing betrayal. "Both of you, listen carefully," he said. "This stops now, tonight. If it doesn't, everyone you know will see exactly what you've been doing." "You can't blackmail us," Kendra said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm not blackmailing anyone. I'm making a promise." Declan pulled out his phone and showed them both the photos he'd taken. "These go public or they stay private. Your choice." Bryce stepped forward aggressively. "You think you can intimidate us? I think you're going to make smart decisions. Get out of my house." "This isn't your house. It's a rental property owned by Harbor View Holdings. I checked the county records." Declan smiled for the first time all evening. "Kendra's been paying for it with money she took from our joint account." The silence that followed was profound. Kendra stared at Declan with something approaching shock. "How did you know about the money, the fake business account, the divorce attorney consultations?" Declan shrugged. "I fix things for a living. When something's broken, I find out why." He walked to the door, then turned back. "You have 24 hours to decide what happens next. After that, I start making decisions for you." The next morning, Kendra was gone when Declan woke up. Her closet was half empty, her toiletries cleared from the bathroom. She'd left a note on the kitchen table. "I can't do this anymore. I'm staying with my sister in Grand Rapids. We need to talk, but not like this. Give me some time to think." Declan read the note twice, then threw it away. His phone rang. "Bryce, we need to meet," Bryce said. "No, we don't." "Look, this got out of hand. Kendra's upset, you're upset. Maybe we can work something out." "There's nothing to work out. Just hear me out. One conversation, someplace public. Then I'll leave you both alone." Declan considered this. "Where?" "That coffee shop downtown, Murphy's. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. "Fine." But Declan had no intention of negotiating. Instead, he spent the day making preparations. He visited the rental truck company again, this time choosing a larger vehicle with more cargo space. He drove to 3 different hardware stores, purchasing rope, duct tape, and plastic tarps. Nothing suspicious individually, but together they formed a kit for serious intimidation. He also stopped by Jim Hansel's office at the hospital. "I need to know about making people disappear," Declan said. Hansel raised an eyebrow. "Legally or otherwise?" "Both. Legally, you get a restraining order, document harassment, let the system handle it. Otherwise," Hansel shrugged. "Most people disappear themselves when the pressure gets too high. They relocate, change jobs, start over somewhere else." "How much pressure?" "Depends on what they have to lose." That evening, Declan researched Bryce's life in detail. His job at Meridian Logistics paid well, but came with strict conduct policies. His loft apartment was expensive, financed through a mortgage that stretched his budget. He was active in several professional organizations, played in a corporate softball league, served on the board of a local charity. Bryce had built himself a comfortable, respectable life, the kind of life that could be destroyed by scandal. Declan spent the night making phone calls and sending emails. By morning, he'd assembled a comprehensive dossier on Bryce Halperin's professional and personal connections, but he still kept his appointment at Murphy's coffee shop. Bryce was already there when Declan arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee and a nervous expression. "Thanks for coming," Bryce said as Declan sat down. "Talk. This whole situation got out of control. What happened between Kendra and me? It wasn't supposed to happen. It just did. Nothing just happens. You made choices." "Yeah, we did. And maybe they were wrong choices. But people make mistakes, right? Doesn't mean we have to destroy each other." Declan sipped his coffee and waited. "Look, I'll transfer to another division, different city, different state if necessary. You'll never see me again, and neither will Kendra." "What about her?" "That's between you two. I'm just saying I'll step aside, let you work things out. And in return, you keep those pictures to yourself. No social media, no emails to my boss, no public drama. Clean break, everyone moves on." It was a reasonable offer from Bryce's perspective. He got to keep his reputation and career while extracting himself from a complicated situation. But Declan had already moved beyond reasonable offers. "Here's my counterproposal," he said. "You resign from Meridian Logistics today. You break your lease and leave town by the end of the week, and you never contact Kendra again." "That's insane. I can't just abandon my entire life." "You should have thought about that before you decided to abandon mine." Bryce leaned forward, his voice dropping to an angry whisper. "You can't force me to do anything. Those pictures don't prove criminal activity. At worst, it's grounds for divorce." "The pictures are just the beginning." Declan pulled out his phone and showed Bryce a series of documents he'd assembled overnight. Bank records showing unusual cash withdrawals from Bryce's personal account, meeting schedules that coincided with missing inventory at Meridian Logistics, expense reports that didn't match actual business activities. "What is this?" Bryce asked. "Evidence of embezzlement, financial irregularities, possible fraud." Declan scrolled through the documents slowly. "Amazing what you can piece together when you know where to look. This is fake. You fabricated this." "Some of it, but not all of it. You've been cutting corners, taking shortcuts, maybe skimming a little off the top. Nothing major, nothing that would normally get noticed. But when someone starts looking specifically," Bryce's face had gone white. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Declan forwarded one of the documents to Bryce's phone. A whistleblower complaint, ready to be filed with the State Attorney General's office, alleging financial misconduct at Meridian Logistics. "This gets filed tomorrow unless you're gone by then. This is extortion. This is consequences." Bryce stared at the document on his phone screen. "Even if some of this is true, it's not enough to convict me of anything. Doesn't need to be. Just needs to be enough to destroy your reputation and trigger an investigation. How long do you think your career survives that kind of scrutiny?" They sat in silence for several minutes. Around them, the coffee shop hummed with normal morning conversation, people discussing weather and work and weekend plans. Normal people with normal problems. "What about Kendra?" Bryce finally asked. "What about her?" "If I disappear, she'll know you forced me out. She'll hate you for it." "She already hates me. At least this way, she'll respect me." Bryce finished his coffee and stood up. "You're making a mistake. This won't fix your marriage." "My marriage is already broken. This is about something else." "What?" Declan looked up at him with eyes that showed no emotion at all. This is about making sure you understand the cost of breaking it. 3 days later, Bryce Halperin submitted his resignation to Meridian Logistics, citing family reasons and the need to relocate. He broke his lease, sold his car, and left town with 2 suitcases and whatever cash he could quickly liquidate. The whistleblower complaint was never filed. Kendra returned from her sister's house the following week to find Bryce gone without explanation. She called Declan, frantic and confused. "Where is he? What did you do?" "I gave him some career advice. He decided to take it." "You threatened him." "I informed him of his options. He made a choice." She appeared at the house that afternoon, her anger barely contained. "You had no right," she said, pacing around the living room. "No right to interfere in my life. Your life includes my life, at least legally. Not for much longer." Declan was sitting in his recliner, perfectly calm. "You want a divorce? File for divorce. But don't pretend this is about rights and interference." "What's it about then?" "It's about you lying to me for months, taking money from our joint account, planning to leave without having the courage to tell me." She stopped pacing. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "When the time was right." "The time was right 6 months ago when you first slept with him." Kendra's face crumpled slightly. For a moment, she looked genuinely remorseful. "I never meant for it to happen this way," she said. "But it did happen this way. Yes. And now you have to live with the consequences." "What consequences? You scared Bryce away. But that doesn't fix anything between us." Declan stood up and walked to the kitchen. When he came back, he was carrying a manila folder. "These are copies of all our financial records for the past year," he said, handing her the folder, "including the records for K. Lowell Consulting Services." Kendra opened the folder and went pale. "Also included are photos of you and Bryce at the lake house, receipts from the restaurants where you had lunch dates, GPS tracking data from your car." Declan sat back down. "Everything I need to prove adultery and financial misconduct in divorce court." "You were spying on me. I was protecting my interests." "This is sick. This is obsessive behavior." "No, Kendra, obsessive behavior would be begging you to come back, going to counseling, pretending this never happened." Declan's voice remained steady. "This is just practical." She threw the folder on the coffee table, papers scattering. "So what now? You destroy my life out of spite?" "I don't need to destroy your life. You're doing that yourself." "What's that supposed to mean?" Declan pulled out his phone and showed her a screenshot. "Meridian Logistics fired 3 people yesterday for policy violations. Seems they discovered some irregularities in the compliance department." Kendra stared at the screen. "They can't fire me for having an affair." "They can fire you for falsifying overtime reports, for using company resources for personal business, for having an inappropriate relationship with a direct report." He scrolled through more screenshots. "Amazing what HR finds when they start looking." "You did this. You reported me." "I didn't have to. Once Bryce left suddenly, they started asking questions. Turns out other people noticed your Tuesday and Thursday night compliance reviews that never generated any paperwork." Kendra sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. "I can fight this. I can prove it's retaliation." "With what evidence? The GPS data showing you at a residential address during work hours? The bank records showing you paying for a rental property with embezzled funds?" "I didn't embezzle anything." "You took money from our joint account to fund an affair. In Michigan, that's considered theft of marital assets." Declan leaned forward slightly. "But you know what the really beautiful part is?" She looked at him with growing horror. "I don't have to prove any of it in court. The suspicion alone is enough to ruin your professional reputation. Who's going to hire a compliance manager who got fired for ethics violations?" "You're enjoying this?" "No, I'm not. This isn't about enjoyment. This is about balance." "Balance? You took something from me. Now I'm taking something from you." Kendra stood up abruptly. "I'm leaving. I'll stay at Sarah's until I can figure this out." "Sarah won't let you stay there." "What are you talking about?" "Sarah doesn't exist. At least not the way you described her. I checked with the neighbors, the local book clubs, even the library. No one knows any Sarah who matches your description." Kendra's mouth fell open. "How could you possibly—" "Because when people lie, they make mistakes. You created an imaginary friend to cover your affair, but you never bothered to create a real background for her." Declan stood up. So where were you really going all those nights? For the first time since she'd returned, Kendra looked genuinely frightened. You're scaring me. Good, you should be scared. For 6 months, you've been lying to me, stealing from me, planning to abandon me. Now you get to experience what it feels like to have your life dismantled by someone who knows exactly what they're doing. This isn't you. This isn't the man I married. The man you married was naive enough to trust you. That man is gone. Kendra grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'm calling the police. And telling them what? That your husband discovered your affair and exposed it to your employer? That's not a crime, Kendra. It's just good detective work. She paused, with her hand on the doorknob. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that actions have consequences, real consequences that can't be undone with apologies or explanations. I understand. No, you don't. But you will. After she left, Declan sat in the quiet house and thought about what came next. He'd successfully removed Bryce from the equation and destroyed Kendra's professional life. But he wasn't finished. The real lesson was still to come. He called Ainsley. How did it go? She asked. Phase 1 is complete. Bryce is gone. Kendra's been fired. And Phase 2? Phase 2 is about making sure she never forgets what it cost to betray someone who trusted her. Be careful, Deck. There's a line between justice and cruelty. She crossed that line 6 months ago. The next morning, Declan began implementing Phase 2 of his plan. It started with a visit to Kendra's mother. Ellen Lowell lived in a senior community in Flint, a tidy apartment filled with family photos and romance novels. She'd always liked Declan, treated him like the son she'd never had. Declan, what a nice surprise. She invited him in and offered coffee. Where's Kendra? That's what I wanted to talk to you about. He explained the situation carefully, showing Ellen some of the evidence he'd gathered. She listened with growing dismay, occasionally shaking her head or making small sounds of disapproval. I can't believe she would do this, Ellen said when he finished. We didn't raise her to lie and cheat. I know you didn't, but she made these choices and now she has to live with them. What can I do to help? Just be aware of what's happening. She might try to move in with you, ask for money, get you involved in her problems. Ellen nodded gravely. I appreciate you telling me the truth. Kendra always was good at making herself look like the victim. From there, Declan visited Kendra's 2 closest friends, her cousin in Ann Arbor, and her former co-workers at her previous job. The story was always the same: concerned husband sharing painful truth, supported by documentation and evidence. By the end of the week, Kendra's entire support network knew about the affair and the financial misconduct, not through gossip or rumor, but through careful, factual presentation by someone they trusted and respected. Kendra called him that Friday, sobbing. What did you tell my mother? The truth. She won't even talk to me. She says I've embarrassed the family. Have you? Everyone thinks I'm some kind of monster. You are some kind of monster. You just hit it well. I made a mistake, Declan. People make mistakes. Mistake is forgetting to buy milk. What you did was plan and execute a deliberate betrayal over months. She was crying harder now. I have nowhere to go. No job, no money, no friends who will help me. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy our marriage. Please, I'm begging you. Just tell me what you want, what I can do to fix this. Declan considered the question. What did he want? I want you to feel what I felt when I discovered your affair. Completely alone, with no one to trust, watching your life fall apart while the person who caused it acts like they're the victim. I feel that now. I understand. No, you don't. You understand the immediate consequences. You don't understand the long-term cost. What long-term cost? Check your credit report. There was a long silence. Then, what did you do? Joint credit cards, remember? I'm authorized to make changes to the accounts. You canceled my credit cards? I reported them stolen. Standard procedure when someone has been making unauthorized purchases for months. Another silence. The rental house payments will bounce. Probably. I'll have an eviction on my record. Probably. Declan, please. This is too much. Is it? Let's see. You stole $15,000 from our joint account. You committed adultery with a coworker. You lied to me every day for 6 months. You were planning to divorce me and take half of everything I'd worked for. His voice remained perfectly calm. Exactly how much consequence do you think that deserves? I said I was sorry. Sorry doesn't repair the damage. Then what will? Nothing. That's the point. Some things can't be fixed. She hung up on him. But Declan wasn't done. Over the next 2 weeks, he methodically dismantled the life Kendra had been building with Bryce. He contacted the landlord of the lake house, provided evidence of illegal subletting, and had the lease terminated. He reported her car as potentially stolen since the payments came from their joint account without his authorization. Every move was legal, documented, and irreversible. Kendra tried calling lawyers, but discovered that most divorce attorneys in the area had conflicts of interest. Ainsley had been busy making consultations, asking hypothetical questions, creating ethical barriers to representation. Finally, Kendra showed up at the house again, looking haggard and desperate. "I'll sign whatever you want," she said. "Divorce papers, financial agreements, anything. Just stop this." "Stop what?" "You know what? The systematic destruction of my life." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just revealing what was already there." "What do you mean?" "You built your affair on lies, theft, and betrayal. I'm just removing the foundation and letting gravity do the rest." She sat down heavily on the couch. "I can't get a job. Every employer runs background checks now, and there are questions about why I was fired from Meridian." "That's unfortunate. I'm living in a motel room. My car got repossessed. I have maybe $300 to my name. How does it feel?" "How does what feel? Being completely dependent on the honesty and kindness of other people, knowing that they have the power to destroy your life if they choose to?" Kendra stared at him. "That's what this is about? Making me feel helpless?" "That's what you made me feel. Every time you lied about book club, every time you kissed me goodbye before going to see him, every time you moved money out of our account to fund your secret life. I never meant to make you feel that way. Intent doesn't matter, only impact." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "What happens now?" "Now you start over, find a new job, build new relationships, create a new life, just like I had to do. Except you're still here, in our house with our life mostly intact. Our life was never intact. It was built on your deception. And now? Now I have a life built on truth. It's smaller, lonelier, but it's real." Kendra looked around the living room, noting the changes Declan had made. New furniture, different artwork, no photos of their life together. "You really are done with me," she said. "I was done with you the moment I saw you kissing him." "Then why all this? Why not just divorce me and move on?" "Because moving on without consequences teaches the wrong lesson." "What lesson?" "That betrayal is a victimless crime. That people can destroy other people's lives and then start fresh somewhere else without accountability." She stood up to leave. "I hope this makes you happy." "It doesn't make me happy, but it makes me satisfied." "What's the difference?" "Happy would require forgiving you. Satisfied just requires balancing the scales." After she left, Declan sat in his quiet house and felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not the peace of resolution or healing, but the peace of completion. He'd set out to make Kendra understand the cost of her betrayal, and he'd succeeded. But there was still one more lesson to teach. 2 weeks later, Declan received a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the old Meridian warehouse tonight at 10 p.m. Come alone." The message was unsigned, but Declan recognized the tone. Bryce had returned. He considered ignoring the message, but curiosity won out. Besides, if Bryce wanted a confrontation, it was better to have it on neutral ground. The old Meridian warehouse was a massive building on the industrial side of town, used for overflow storage when the main facility was full. At night, it was dark and isolated, surrounded by empty lots and abandoned rail lines. Declan arrived early and parked across the street, watching the building through binoculars. Bryce's Honda was already there, parked near a side entrance. At exactly 10 p.m., Declan walked to the entrance and found it unlocked. The warehouse was dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long shadows between towering stacks of shipping containers and industrial equipment. The air smelled of machine oil and dust. "Bryce?" he called out. "Over here." Declan followed the voice deeper into the warehouse, past rows of forklifts and loading equipment. He found Bryce standing near a cleared area in the center of the building, his face illuminated by a work light he'd set up. "You came," Bryce said. "You asked me to. I wasn't sure you would. Thought you might be too scared." Declan looked around the warehouse, noting the exits, the sight lines, the potential tools. "Scared of what?" "Of facing what you've done. What I've done. You destroyed my life, my career, my reputation, my future, all because your wife chose me over you. My wife chose an affair. That's different than choosing you." "Is it? She was planning to leave you. We had a life together." "Had. Past tense. Bryce stepped closer, and Declan could see he'd been drinking. His movements were slightly unsteady, his eyes red-rimmed. "You think you're so smart," Bryce said. "So clever with your little schemes and manipulations, but you miss something important." "What's that?" "I don't have anything left to lose." Bryce pulled a tire iron from behind his back, holding it like a tool. "You took my job, my apartment, my girlfriend, made me run away like a coward. But running away gave me time to think, time to plan." "Plan what?" "Plan how to make you pay." He swung the tire iron at Declan's head. Declan ducked and rolled behind a stack of pallets as the metal tool struck concrete, sending up sparks. "This won't solve anything," Declan called out. "It'll solve my problem." Another swing, another miss. Bryce was angry and drunk, making his attacks wild and uncoordinated. Declan grabbed a length of chain from a nearby hoist and used it to block the next strike. The tire iron wrapped around the chain, and for a moment they struggled for control. "You don't understand," Bryce gasped. "She loved me, really loved me. We were going to be together. She was using you to escape her marriage." "That's not true." "When's the last time you talked to her?" Bryce hesitated, and Declan yanked the chain hard, pulling the tire iron from his grip. It clattered across the concrete floor. "She hasn't called you, has she?" Declan continued. "Hasn't tried to find you, hasn't asked where you went. She doesn't know where I am. She doesn't care where you are." Bryce lunged at him barehanded, but Declan was ready. He sidestepped and let Bryce's momentum carry him into a stack of shipping crates. "You want to know the truth about Kendra?" Declan asked as Bryce struggled to his feet. "She's already looking for someone else. Someone with a better job, a nicer car, more money to steal." "You're lying." "She told me herself. Said the affair with you was just practice for the real thing." It was a lie, but Bryce was drunk and angry enough to believe it. "No, she wouldn't. She's a user, Bryce. She used me for 12 years, used you for 6 months, and she'll use whoever comes next." Bryce sat down heavily on a wooden crate, his fight deflating. "I lost everything for her. You lost everything because you made stupid choices. She said we had a future. She said a lot of things. That's what liars do." For several minutes, they sat in the dim warehouse, both breathing hard from the brief fight. "What am I supposed to do now?" Bryce finally asked. "Start over. Find a new job, a new city, a new life, learn from your mistakes." "Easy for you to say. You still have everything." "I have a house and a bank account. Everything else got destroyed when she decided to cheat." "At least you got revenge?" "I got justice. There's a difference." Bryce looked up at him. "What's the difference?" "Revenge is about making yourself feel better. Justice is about restoring balance." "And you feel balanced now?" Declan considered the question. "I feel like the debt has been paid." "What debt?" "The debt you both owed me for destroying my marriage, my trust, my life." Bryce stood up slowly. "So what happens now?" "Now you leave town and don't come back. For real this time. And if I don't, then this becomes a police matter instead of a personal matter." Bryce nodded and walked toward the warehouse exit. At the door, he turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About your marriage, about all of it. I know you are, but sorry doesn't repair the damage." After Bryce left, Declan stood alone in the warehouse for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened over the past 2 months. He'd succeeded in destroying both Kendra's and Bryce's lives, proving that actions had consequences. That betrayal carried a real cost. But the victory felt hollow, empty. Not because he regretted what he'd done, but because it couldn't restore what had been lost. His marriage was still over, his trust was still broken, his life was still fundamentally changed. The only difference was that now Kendra and Bryce understood the price of their choices: justice, but not healing; balance, but not peace. Declan walked out of the warehouse and drove home to his empty house, where he would spend the rest of his life rebuilding everything they had destroyed. 3 months later, Declan finalized the divorce papers. Kendra had found a job as a cashier at a grocery store in Grand Rapids, living in a studio apartment and taking the bus to work. She signed the papers without contest, accepting a settlement that left her with almost nothing. She had no choice. The evidence of her misconduct made any other outcome impossible. Bryce had moved to Arizona, where he worked at a warehouse loading dock under an assumed name. His professional reputation was destroyed, his credit ruined, his future prospects limited to manual labor and minimum wage jobs. Neither of them would ever again have the comfort of assuming that their actions didn't have consequences. And Declan? He lived quietly in the house he'd once shared with Kendra, fixing other people's broken things and maintaining the perfect order of his solitary life. He'd learned something important during those months of careful revenge. The most devastating thing you could do to someone wasn't to destroy them quickly, but to systematically remove every foundation they'd built their life upon, leaving them to face the reality of who they really were. Kendra had been a liar and a thief who thought her charm and manipulation made her untouchable. Bryce had been a weak, selfish man who thought his position and money made him invulnerable. Now they both knew better. On a rainy Tuesday evening in November, exactly 1 year after he'd first discovered Kendra's affair, Declan sat in his recliner and opened a letter that had arrived in the morning mail. It was from Kendra, written on cheap notebook paper in her careful handwriting. Declan, I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that I understand what you did and why you did it. I deserved everything that happened to me. I've had a lot of time to think about the person I became, the choices I made, the damage I caused. You were right about the consequences. Some things can't be fixed. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that the lesson was learned. I hope you find happiness. Kendra Declan read the letter twice, then fed it into the fireplace and watched it burn. Outside, rain drummed against the windows and wind rattled the trees. Inside, the house was warm and quiet and perfectly ordered. He'd gotten exactly what he'd wanted, complete understanding from the people who had betrayed him. But understanding, he'd discovered, was a cold comfort. It was enough, though. It would have to be. The next morning, Declan went back to work fixing other people's broken things, knowing that some breaks could be repaired and others could only be replaced. He'd learned to tell the difference. And sometimes that was wisdom enough.